Hi, Sam.
How you doing?
I'm good. So for anyone
Can
who's
you?
listening in, I'm stoked because we have Sam here today, one of our amazing teachers at the studio. Not only is Sam an absolutely killer Baptiste power yoga teacher, she's a phenomenal athlete. And Sam, actually, I'm curious, which came first for you? Were you into running first or yoga? Like, what came first?
Running. And then I found yoga because it saved my body. So I could keep running.
Oh, okay. So you would say like the your yoga practice, like say more about that. Like what about your yoga practice sustains your running passion or practice?
So I first found, I did yoga a little bit growing up, but then I really found it when I was down in North Carolina. And I was training for my first full marathon. And there was this studio that I like totally adored. It's actually where I met Blair down in North Carolina. And I found that had a colossal impact. My hips were open, my body was calming down, my nervous system was calming down. I think that what sometimes we don't understand is the body doesn't know the difference between like good and bad cortisol, and running is a lot of stress. And so I was like in undergrad stress and then would run and be stressed, and my body couldn't really tell the difference. So I got to yoga and I got to down regulate, and I found a different type of nourishing movement and a community that was really welcoming, special, like up to something bigger. And it gave me like a side quest per se.
So I love that, first of all. For running your first marathon though, you had to be pretty young, right? Like that was you were in college.
I ran my first half when I was like 19, and then my first full when I was like 21, 20, 20. Yeah, I think 20, 21.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a way of going through it. If that makes sense.
And so when you're preparing for or recovering from, like, let's say for you, a major race, do you, is there like a specific thing you'll emphasize in your yoga practice, either like leading up to something or after?
Yeah, I think that leading up to it, I like minimum 2 to 3 times a week. And then especially as I get older, that number increases. Um, and also being like very, I think one of the best things about our practice, because we get so ingrained in it, is that we learn how to shift it with what our body needs, and going into the room and maybe not pushing 100% and just being in the room and like moving my body in a nourishing way, like really concentrating on like moving my hips in a way that will hopefully like open me on the road, and also like being careful about not overstretching it and not over leaning into things, and like what we call as teachers like the dumping into the body. And but I think like my favorite thing about our practice is that like no matter what, as long as you're in the room, like you can do what you need to do in order to sustain what your body wants to feel.
Totally right. It's like adaptable.
Mm-hmm.
I
I love.
love that. So, okay, so just to give people some context, like for Sam, like I have it in my head that like you run a marathon like every week. Like is that accurate, I guess? Like back me up, I guess. Root me in reality a little bit of like what is your running like schedule if you even have one?
Yeah, I think that that's a really good question, especially because I think it's not talked about enough that like the importance of rest and recovery in a sport that's so competitive and so such a high volume of training. I try and like if my body feels called for it, like one big thing per year, maybe two. As I've gotten older, I have to be very careful. And when I moved out to the West Coast in 2019, I transitioned from road running to trail running. And that's when I found like long distance trail running. And I love being out there. And so it'll be interesting going back to the road for the New York Marathon. Uh, it's definitely a different type of training. I find that road running is much harder on the body. And so like being very careful during the training block, which is like 3 to 4 months of like pretty high volume mileage. Um and I also don't mind the structure. I'm in grad school, so it's nice to like have something solidified as moving through life.
So, okay, so say more about that. So it sounds like you're following like some sort of like loose, at least training plan. And when you think about like your mindset as you've signed up to run this New York Marathon, right? Which I think is in the fall,
Mhm.
right? What can you share when it is?
November 3rd.
November 3rd, okay. And do you like what is your mindset going into it? So is it just like for you, like this is something fun that I'm doing, like that I enjoy doing, or do you go into it being like, I want to challenge myself to like run it the best I possibly can? Like which approach do you take?
That's such a great question because if you asked me that 3 years ago, it would have been a very different answer. Um, I have probably moved away from racing. I have a pretty gnarly hip injury on my right hip, which has pulled me back. And the first response from the doctor when I went, he said, "How important is running to you?" And I was like, "Well, very." And it actually invited me into a more moderate type of running and a more moderate way of moving my body, and has opened up a whole new way of living that's allowed for like really beautiful friendships outside of the sport, and just learning a lot more about myself and what I actually like to do. And so I kind of made a commitment to stop racing per se, or halt the racing or lessen the racing, and move my body for something like we call it in the studio, like bigger than ourselves. And so in terms of this, like I knew I would only run it if I was running for something bigger than myself. If I have the privilege of moving my body in that capacity, I'm going to move it for something else besides me now.
Ooh, I love that. What a good segue. But there's like so much there to unpack because it's almost like for a person like you, right, who I know you, right? I know you're like you gravitate towards like you want to do the best you can and like you're like a type A person a little bit, I would say. So what is it like for you to like it's almost like you're holding a boundary, right, within running because you're saying like I know like yeah, I could like probably win the New York Marathon if I
And I
wanted.
could never.
But
There's so
like
many fast people.
but like how do you yeah, I guess just like what has it been like for you to hold up that boundary after that conversation with your doctor?
It was hard. I had to go to therapy. um, and
We
it was
love therapy,
healing.
by the way. We're big
I
supporters.
love therapy. Highly suggest going to everybody. um, and I found it to be really healing. And I think it's much more comfortable. And I judge the success off of like how I'm feeling versus any sort of like metric. And I do like a lot less like pace-based stuff and more about feeling. And if I wake up and I don't want to do the workout that's planned, I don't do it, and I do it when I feel called to doing it. And it's like my favorite slogan ever is I'm like on the same side as my body. So as soon as I go against the grain, which is kind of the boundary, I guess, is like being on the same side as my boundaries, as my body. Like as soon as I cross that and I'm not on the same side as my body, like everything crumbles, like mentally, physically, emotionally. And so like leading the training and leading my running now like from my heart and from my body versus like an expectation has really been transformative to my entire life.
Oh, that's awesome, Sam. And it's like such a good kind of like inspiration for all of us. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more. So you talked about how like in an effort to be on the same side as your body and commit to doing this like kind of one-off road race, you wanted to be up to something bigger than yourself. So could you tell us a little bit about I know you're fundraising and like what are you fundraising for and how did you choose that?
Yeah, so I'm fundraising for the MS Society. I'm on their team, which I love being on the team. Um, and it's about 40 people on the team. So I'm feeling really honored that they let me into that circle. I have been working with the MS Society basically my whole life. I lost my mom to MS in 2016. And so everything I've done is for her, and also to pay it forward and to hopefully create a world that is free of MS. And we know that we're very, very, very close to a cure, which is crazy, with stem cell research and with other research and clinical trials. And so knowing that like this is a big fundraising push to get us like really close to the end of all of this. So everybody has to raise a minimum of $5,000. So it's a really quite a colossal amount of money. And it's a big goal. And I think that it's really powerful. There's several people who have already hit the goal. Like a little bit of a competitive leaderboard we got there. But it just shows that so many people are pushing towards something bigger. And I think that that's the beauty of some of these races. And more people run for charity, I think, than people who get in through the lottery because it's such a philanthropic race. And I think that that is really a cool testament to the sport, and where like I personally believe I'm most aligned with is something, a race like that. You know, it brings so many people to the city, and it's so big. And they were like, we're gonna create something more here than just a lot of people running. We're gonna create something bigger.
Totally. And I've run the New York Marathon a couple times myself, and the I always tell people, I'm like, if you want to feel like Beyonce, like go run the New York Marathon and wear
I'm
your
like,
name.
I'm like secretly, not secretly, I'm very openly looking forward to the attention.
Sam, give us a little bit of a lens, because so for you, I'm sure like MS, like the growing up with your mom, like hit so close to home. And could you give us a little lens into like some of the challenges that she faced, or like hurdles you saw her overcome, and like just like compel people, like if you're free Saturday, like come support Sam and Liz in this class. And like, yeah, could you just share like even just like a glimpse into like what that was like for you as a kid, watching your mom sort of like handling that on a day-to-day basis?
Thank you so much for asking that question. I think a really big misconception with people who have grief is that we don't want to talk about it. And actually, all we want to do is talk about it. So, thanks for giving me some space to share and to share for her and on behalf of her. My mom was so cool. She was a competitive gymnast and a competitive golfer, and was just like a really gifted athlete. And unfortunately, MS kind of stripped her of that. MS, she had a lesion on her frontal lobe, so that was pretty catastrophic to her being. And it was a slow, she was diagnosed in 1990 and passed in 2016. So a really long, slow downfall. And to watch her like slowly lose her physical capabilities was really something that pushed me towards moving my body for something bigger. Um, I'm like, I'm so lucky like to be able to move and to be able to run on behalf of her and ride on behalf of her and fundraise on behalf of her and be basically an advocate for a person who should have lived a long, healthy life and unfortunately was not able to. And I think that watching that and then watching her so frustrated, and to, you know, to think that we like work so hard and like we all work so hard in the yoga room and in life, and something so out of her control to take that from her, um I think was just like the most devastating thing ever. And my father always says, I think the hardest thing for her was that she wasn't able to love her children fully because she wasn't able to move her body as well and move her mind as well. And um, so when she passed and I was a sophomore in college, I kind of had a big aha moment and like woke up and was like, I gotta be doing something. Like, who am I to be doing nothing for my body when someone I love so dearly who wanted to move their body, it was taken from them. So I remember doing MS events with my mom as a kid. And like, I remember the Philadelphia Zoo, we'd go there and do the walks. And I just did the walk this past spring, and it's very powerful. And I feel grateful like that the MS Society exists, not only for the research, but it's also like a little piece of a connection to her because we did those things together.
And like how incredible, right? That you've used something that like you said, like there was a lot of frustration and like hardship from experiencing that for everyone in your family, obviously, and like that you're able to sort of like not flip it, but like use it as like a catalyst to like help people, because just like you're saying, like they're so close to a cure. And like I was reading a little bit about it last night, and what's incredible is that, like, let's say someone were to get like an MS diagnosis now, it would probably, not in every situation, but it's highly likely that like they would have better outcomes than someone 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And so it's it's like there's so much meaning. Like sometimes I feel like it's like we're donating to these massive organizations and you're kind of like, what even is this? But this is like, no, like this is actually impacting families like right now. And so if again, Sam and Liz, they're hosting this charity series coming up on Saturday, July 20th at 11:15 and Saturday, August 24th at 11:15. And Sam, like, what does it mean for you when someone either like shows up in the room to support you guys in these classes, or if they can't be there, like donates online? Of course, we can always DM anyone the links. But what does it mean for you when someone like actually shows up to the studio to support you teaching these charity classes?
Like gratitude's like a gross understatement of a word. And it's also just like a little marker of somebody who's going to help a family keep their loved one in this life and in a healthy way. And knowing that like the people I love and the people that come to this room that I adore and have the privilege of being in a community with also want to work towards keeping families safe and healthy is a really powerful thing. And it just goes to show like what the power of community is. And I think that like as I see people contribute and people always like we talk about like the 1 degree, everyone's 1 degree off of something. And a lot of people come into the studio having been impacted by MS in their family or personally. And um, I think that there's something to be said about them showing up in their body and in the room and for the people around them to just pay it forward in a way. And I think that it's really awesome that we have a community willing to do that.
Totally. I'm hoping to make the one on August 24th. I haven't told Andrew that
Yeah.
yet. I plan to be there.
Uh, the one on August 24th is actually the day after the 9th anniversary of my mom passing. So it'll be a really special class for me and a really beautiful way to commemorate her. So I'm really looking forward to all of it.
Well, we can't wait to be there to support you. Like you've supported all of us in this community so much and like just showed up time and time again, inspired us as athletes and as advocates for our own bodies. And so we can't wait to celebrate you, celebrate your mom, and like help out families who are impacted this. So we'll be cheering you on from the West Coast as you run this November. And we can't wait to join you in class again Saturday, July 20th, 11:15 a.m. and Sunday, August 24th. And Liz and Sam will be team teaching, so it'll be amazing.
And there'll be cookies.
Oh, even better. Okay.
Even better. Always.
All right, Sam, it was so good to see you. Thanks for carving out some time to chat.
Anytime. Thank you for having me.
Okay, bye, honey.
Bye.